Alright everyone, we start off today, of course, with our main video talking about critical race theory. There's a rebranding attempt to try to take critical race theory. First they tried to rebrand it into social justice education or racial justice learning and stuff like that. That didn't really work because, like I said, with the potato metaphor, if I call it a potato and you're calling it a pomme de terre, and then we begin describing what we're actually talking about, you see that the two things are identical. You're just using different terminology. Sometimes this is due to linguistic gaps. People speak different languages, have different ideas from them. In this case, it's propaganda. It's an attempt to relabel something that it is not, in order to try to bypass overwhelming criticism of the concept, which is critical race theory. Of course, I wrote a booklet on the subject, Critical Race Theory Debunked. Still selling hundreds of copies a month, so I'm assuming you should get a copy if you haven't. Seems relatively popular, and I wonder why. If you look at it, effectively at its core, at the most simple explanation about critical race theory you can give is that you've taken Marxism, you've removed most of the class struggle elements, what little remains is subjugate, and then you've added race struggle. So the class struggle is just reinterpreted as being subjugate to race and privilege. Of course, this definitely de-internationalizes the commie thing, because it wouldn't be a problem in a country with a 100% homogenous culture. It wouldn't affect a culture in which the downtrodden underclass was the majority and had all the wealth, like most countries in the world, by the way. And so it's very limiting. It's obviously an attempt to undermine the educational system of the Western world. But now they're trying to rebrand again. Now when people fight against it and say, well, critical race theory shouldn't be taught in taxpayer-funded schools, now they're trying to label it book burning. They're trying to label it censorship. They're trying to invert the meaning of the term cancel culture, which is absolutely hilarious. They've attempted to take the ring of power and use it against Sauron, so to speak, although in this case it'd be more like taking Galadriel's ring away and expecting her to melt into a puddle. It's not really working and it's kind of cringe, but I figured that I would explain it anyway, because there are people out there sometimes that like watching this kind of video because they have liberal relatives or something. They've been hoodwinked by critical race theory, but they don't know quite how to tell them, hey, I'm sorry, you're being propagandized to. Here's the reality. Now, keep in mind before I continue, there will be a pinned comment down below if you're watching this video on YouTube, links in the description as well, to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind I'm making now 3 exclusive videos every day. That is, the majority of my content no longer goes on YouTube. Partially to punish them for their illegitimate strike of my content. So for a week I wouldn't have been able to upload, so that doesn't expire for a couple more days. I'm probably going to keep it at that level though, because I've realized you gain more subscribers if you make less content. I know it makes no sense to anyone who's been around YouTube since the earlier days. Hell, I didn't even join the platform till 2007. It had already been around for 4 years. I would think they would want you to make more content as long as it's reasonably good and you have a reasonable audience. Its algorithm now disagrees. They would prefer you to make 1 video every 24-hour period maximum, sometimes less than that. I guess their algorithm assumes that you're taking the extra time to edit them and make them prettier or something. I really think that YouTube might be crazy enough to believe that that's reality. Anyway, unedited as though my videos are, I have never used a script in the, now 13, 14 years I've been making political content. Critical race theory being blocked in taxpayer-funded schools is not censorship. Indeed, the alternative is censorship. One of the big pushes against critical race theory right now is curriculum transparency. This is the idea that the taxpayers that fund the school system, the people that are paying the school taxes, whose kids are in the school, being served by the school, have a right to understand what the basic curriculum is. It should be listed for them. Now, even absent this, they can always look at the books that their kids are reading. They can look at the homework. They can, in some states, they beg parents not to do this. You can watch the Zoom call where little Jimmy's in his bedroom being propagandized to about some bullshit woke math. So you can get a general idea, but this goes further. This enshrines the concept that the curriculum materials, the discussions, the material that's actually there should be available to parents in an increasingly digital age online. It should be there for them to peruse. They shouldn't have to go through their kid's backpack every single day to find out what they're learning. Now, the idea, I would think, is pro-education. Hey, you've got school districts around the country that, and for not racial reasons, by the way, suck. The parents get involved, they go through the curriculum and say, oh, I think I know why it sucks. This stuff is 3 years behind where they're supposed to be. They're reading Berenstain Bears, they're fucking approaching their 20s and stuff like that. It's dumbed down, or the material is objectionable in some manner. We've had this fight before over sex ed. Now, I do not take up the TradCon sort of line on this. If it's a taxpayer-funded school, it would be good if little Jimmy understands human reproduction. Otherwise, you end up getting a bunch of teen pregnancies, potentially. But as we've seen, there have been attempts to take material that is not scientific, it is not academic, it's not artistic nudes or something, hardcore material, and cast it off as scientific. We saw this on no less than YouTube only a few years ago. Many of you may remember House of Air. House of Air was a short video which contained only the most hardcore of fetishistic homosexual porn. It involved Santorum. It involved fisting. It was explicit. It wasn't like, hey, this is the term, here's a cartoon vaguely depicting it. Here's an academic article talking about, bacterium in the anal lining or something. It wasn't like that. It cast itself off as anthropological. This is an anthropological study of gay sexual behavior. But it was hardcore porn. YouTube took 3 days to remove it. Now, when you have that kind of limit pushing, and when you have that kind of resistance to remove that objectionable material unless overwhelming numbers of people complain about it, if you extend this to the school system, why would they want the curriculums not to be transparent? So that only a few people know that it's being taught at all. Only the most up and with it parents will be going to the school board meeting. The rest of them, they don't have the time necessarily. They're not going to the meetings and spending hours each week rifling through their kids' notes and their homework. They have other things they have to do. They have to put food on the table. Only parents that tend, and this is another thing about critical race theory that amuses me, it'll harm lower income people's educational attainment. It'll be primarily parents in that district with more time on their hands. So you've got a handful of people more money, so they can take a day off of work to go and complain, in other words, to write the letter to the editor, to go through the homework, etc. Where does this cause inequality? Here's a real big problem. Which schools are actually doing this? And in which schools are the parents more likely to have time or not have time to actually go to the school board meeting, to actually talk to the teachers, to go through the kids' homework? Upper middle class parents, they have the time, but they're already in private schools, basically. Homeschooled students will be fine. They're not getting affected by woke math. They're learning that 2 + 2 = 4. They're not learning that 2 + 2 = whatever you want it to be. They're not learning critical race theory, which is Marxist revisionism. They're learning civics. They'll have by the time that they're in their senior year, they don't need senior law because they already understand the basis of these things. Certainly, of course, we've announced that we're pregnant now. Looking at the public school system in much of the world, it's like, well, where's the education? It doesn't exist. Now, there are some public schools that are good. I went to public school. I got the reasonably good education, but you got to understand it was in one of the best districts in one of the best states for education. More on par with what you get in maybe like Norway or something. I've seen schools in other parts of the country, and they are essentially like prison daycares. That's basically all they are. The gifted students get extra classes, and hopefully their parents save up enough for a tutor, because otherwise they're getting the bare minimum education. They're also getting sub-bare minimum nutrition when you look at school lunches. Even in my high school, I didn't really touch that. I had one chicken sandwich once. In the entire time I was in high school, it was the only time I ate lunch. All the other times I took a thermos of tea, by the way, and I did homework during the lunch period. That's why I got home. I had no homework. I played Grand Theft Auto so many times. And other games too, but, GTA Vice City was a really good one when I was in high school. But it's not censorship. Curriculum transparency is just saying, hey, the teachers should tell the parents what's being taught. Well, here's the thing. Isn't it a damning rebuke of critical race theory that its own proponents think that it will be cast aside and cast out if the parents know what's being taught? And then they'll come out the school board meetings, and politicians do this too. Well, parents shouldn't be the ones educating. Here's the problem again. Some of these parents are more well-trained than the teachers, at least, in certain studies. You get a parent, they get a fucking PhD in history, and you're trying to tell them that a couple of business majors who run the school in the administrative sense and a teacher with a bachelor's degree know more than he does or her? I don't think so. I think at least in the specialist part of the field, they're probably smarter than the teacher and the administrators put together. This would be the case with me. I studied anthropology. I've done it on my own as well, and I don't think that there's any public school teacher that would be able to hold their own against me on comparative religion either. So if there were a course, I'd want to be involved, and if the school board told me that I shouldn't be, I'd feel kind of sad about that, especially when I'm literally paying them to do that job. This is an attempt to dumb down students and to quash any criticism of that dumbing down, which is also wasteful spending when you think about it. Just for the neocons out there that don't care about CRT itself, but you do care about your tax totals. It costs a lot of money, and the teachers' unions are heavily pushing this shit because it's easier to teach lies. It's really easy. You just give them the latest screed by Joy Reid to read, and you don't have to teach the class. You can put on the Malcolm X Part 3 movie or something like that. But it's not justice. It's not helping students, and disproportionately, because of educational attainment that even the CRT proponents themselves talk about, this will disproportionately dumb down certainly the history and civics curricula, insofar as they exist at all, in majority-minority communities, inner-city schools. It's not affecting the private school. It's not affecting the homeschooled kid. It's not really affecting the kid that has rich parents who also hire tutors. It's not affecting the kid that's in a really, really good public school. It's affecting the inner-city kids. It's going to make them dumb. They're even trying to make math woke. You've seen it. It's not a meme. It's 2 + 2 = 4. However, you can also get a good mark on that if you think 2 + 2 = 7, but you're willing to justify the premise. Well, no, that's not the way that, go into engineering and try to submit that when you're signing up. You're definitely going to need affirmative action of one kind or another in order to get a fucking community college position. How is this particularly a justice? No, it's going to hold back an entire generation of kids because their parents weren't wealthy and they weren't living in the right place at the right time. Well, you were born in Brooklyn as opposed to outer Long Island. Sorry, you're not going to be a nuclear physicist. Yes, Jimmy, I know that you would love to be an astronaut, but you think that 2 + 2 = 5. And you've been told that everyone's bigoted if they tell you otherwise, so you're never going to learn reality. That's about all. Peace out.